Would you recognize the moment they decided you were no longer useful? Not loudly, not with drama, just quiet erasure behind polished smiles and strategic emails. That's what happened to me. My name is Jason Guerra. I gave 14 years of my life to Redstone Realty Group building land networks, closing high-stakes deals no one else could touch, and earning the kind of loyalty from property owners that you can't fake. I didn't chase applause. I didn't wear flashy suits. But when deals stalled, it was always me they called to fix it. Then, one Thursday morning in a sunlit glass conference room, Sabrina Voss looked up from her tablet and said the words that every seasoned employee fears. "Jason, we're restructuring. Your position is no longer aligned with the company's future." I nodded, smiled politely, and said thank you. But what she didn't realize was this 2 years ago I had quietly acquired the land beneath their headquarters through a holding firm no one even noticed. They fired me from the company. But they forgot I owned the ground they stood on. If this kind of story makes you think twice about quiet loyalty and hidden strength, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. What happens next will change everything. Jason Guerra wasn't the type of man who sought the spotlight. At 51, he had the weathered calm of someone who had seen promises made and watched markets rise and fall, and learned the value of moving quietly while others rushed to be seen. When he joined Redstone Realty Group 14 years ago, the company was nothing more than a modest regional brokerage trying to survive in a volatile market. Jason had just gone through a difficult divorce, and though his heart was bruised, his focus was razor sharp. Real estate wasn't just a job for him. It became a discipline, a rhythm, a way to rebuild his life. While other agents chased commissions and flashy listings in booming suburban areas, Jason took a different path. He specialized in the slow deals land acquisition off-market parcels, long-term negotiations with families who'd owned property for generations. His style wasn't aggressive. He visited farms. He had coffee with owners. He sent thank-you letters by hand. Over time, he became the bridge between Redstone and sellers who wouldn't talk to anyone else. When developers started circling for suburban expansion, it was Jason who had already secured the zoning opportunities and the trust of the landholders. No one saw the phone calls at 10 p.m. or the weekends he spent driving out to dusty, forgotten counties just to speak with a 78-year-old widow who needed someone to understand her fears about letting go of her family's land. Inside the company, he wasn't flashy. His desk was always neat. He wore the same navy blazer most days. But those who paid attention knew he was the one who made the most complicated transactions look effortless. He didn't chase bonuses, though he earned his share. What mattered to Jason was doing the job well and doing it quietly. When the pandemic hit, the company panicked. Lending slowed. Deals froze. Clients vanished. But Jason didn't. He called past sellers to check in on them. He restructured offers to protect both sides. He even helped one elderly couple draft a will that included a land transfer provision to the company, a move that kept an entire development corridor in play. While the sales floor sat silent, Jason was still working, still earning trust, still building. But the truth was few at Redstone understood what he really did. To most, he was just the land guy, a reliable cog in the machine. Even after he secured the rights to a 60-acre plot that tripled the firm's regional footprint, there was no celebration. Just a quiet email, no ceremony, no thanks. And Jason never asked for recognition. His reward came in knowing the land would be used well, that families got fair deals, that development happened with respect. What no one realized, not even the CEO, was that in those years of handshakes and quiet drives, Jason had been learning something deeper. He was watching how real power moved in silence, how trust was currency, and how the land beneath their buildings often mattered more than the buildings themselves. He wasn't planning revenge. He was building options. Jason Guerra's job title never did justice to what he actually accomplished inside Redstone Realty Group. Officially, he was the Senior Land Acquisitions Manager. Unofficially, he was the silent architect behind most of the company's large-scale success. While others in the firm obsessed over branding online impressions and performance dashboards, Jason worked in the shadows preparing foundations before a single blueprint was drawn. His specialty wasn't closing fast deals, it was anticipating opportunities before they even entered the market. Most junior agents wouldn't bother with properties that weren't already listed. Jason avoided them on purpose. He studied tax records, old zoning maps, and courthouse filings. He would drive hours to knock on the door of a landowner who hadn't spoken to a broker in years, just to start a conversation that might take 2 more years to mature. That's how he operated, slow, deliberate, and precise. But during the COVID lockdowns, Jason's importance became undeniable, though still few recognized it. When commercial real estate slowed and banks clamped down on credit, Jason turned to something no one else had: his personal trust network. Landowners who didn't trust corporate paperwork still took Jason's calls. His name meant something. He managed to salvage a multi-million-dollar deal that would have collapsed entirely had he not convinced a local lender to provide short-term bridge financing based entirely on his word. He even flew out on his own dime to meet a war widow who was ready to walk away from a 22-acre deal after Redstone's legal team made her feel bullied. Jason sat at her kitchen table for 2 hours listening. That deal closed 2 weeks later. The company sent him a generic bonus email. Jason didn't complain. He kept doing what he did best, solving problems before anyone knew there was a problem. One of his most brilliant moves happened quietly during the height of the supply chain panic in late 2020. Redstone had been planning a new mixed-use development near a transit hub, but the original seller suddenly died, leaving the property tied up in probate. Jason anticipated the issue. Months earlier, he had developed a relationship with the owner's attorney and secured a right of first refusal clause that kicked in upon the owner's death. It was airtight. Redstone got the land. The project moved forward. But no one celebrated Jason. Not really. They just kept forwarding him new problems to fix. The most ironic part: the land that Redstone's new headquarters now stood on, their shining glass office, built just last year, was originally part of a bundled acquisition Jason had negotiated. But he had quietly separated one key parcel in that bundle before presenting it to the legal team. That parcel remained outside of Redstone's ownership and instead was leased through a separate holding entity, Sunhaven Equity Holdings. What no one realized was that Jason had founded Sunhaven quietly during the early chaos of 2020. He did it legally, using personal funds while navigating a sea of collapsing deals. He wasn't hiding it, but he also wasn't advertising it. Why? Because over the years he had seen what happened to people like him, quiet, experienced, loyal professionals who gave everything to a company, until someone newer and louder decided they were in the way. Jason didn't know exactly when it would happen, but he knew it would. And when it did, he wanted to be ready not to retaliate, but to protect what he had built. So behind the spreadsheets and site visits, Jason was building something more resilient. He wasn't just buying land. He was buying time. The shift began quietly, like most corporate betrayals do not, with a confrontation, but with a calendar change. Jason noticed his weekly development briefings were no longer on his schedule. Vendor emails that used to CC him were going directly to operations. Internal memos referenced projects he'd initiated, but his name was absent. At first he thought it was an oversight, but then came the meetings, polished, tightly managed, and now led by someone new, Sabrina Voss. 35. Recently hired as Vice President of Operations, fresh off an MBA from Wharton, and full of confidence that came not from experience, but from boardroom theory. On her first day, she gave a presentation titled Redstone 2. Zero, featuring buzzwords like agile pivoting, AI-based decision pipelines, and decentralized risk visualization. Jason didn't roll his eyes, but he didn't applaud either. He simply took notes and observed. Sabrina was sharp, no question, but what she lacked in field exposure, she made up for with speed and certainty. To her, Jason's old-school style was a problem to be solved. Why spend hours on personal calls when a CRM could automate relationship management? Why rely on gut feel when data science could score land parcels in real time? Her vision for Redstone was sleek, efficient, and digital. Jason, in her view, was analog in a wireless world. In their first one-on-one, she got to the point quickly. "You've done great things for this company," she said, smiling without warmth. "But we need to scale beyond legacy methods. Your relationships are valuable, but they're not replicable. That's a risk." Jason simply nodded. "Relationships are the system," he replied. "Land doesn't sell to spreadsheets." She smiled again, more tightly this time. "We'll be centralizing acquisition negotiations starting next quarter. I'd like you to serve in more of an advisory role moving forward." Jason understood then his influence was being quietly erased, not because he had failed, but because his success didn't fit the new model. And Sabrina wasn't looking for partners. She was looking for control. From that point on, the erosion was systematic. Projects he had sourced were handed to younger analysts. Contracts were redrafted without his input. Even landowners he'd known for years began calling him confused about new names contacting them from Redstone. One elderly rancher told Jason, "I don't like how this new girl talks to me, like I'm a figure on a spreadsheet." Jason didn't push back. He observed. He documented. He listened. And quietly, behind the scenes, he activated Phase 2 of a plan he had been refining for nearly 3 years. Sunhaven Equity Holdings, his private land entity, began acquiring the parcels adjacent to several upcoming Redstone developments. He didn't block their progress. He just created necessary pathways, access roads, zoning transitions, utility corridors. Redstone could still develop, but only with his cooperation. No one at corporate noticed. Not yet. He also began informing his longtime contact sellers, brokers, title lawyers, that he was planning something new. Not a rival company, something cleaner, more human, a boutique firm focused on ethical land partnerships. The idea resonated. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was simply responding to what Sabrina's ambition had revealed. In her rush to modernize, she had forgotten the very soil that made real estate possible. And Jason, he was done planting seeds for others. It was time to harvest what he had sown. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that looked like any other bright sky steady emails, the usual back and forth between departments. Jason Guerra had just finished updating a zoning summary for a sensitive farmland acquisition when his calendar pinged 11:00 a.m. Conference Room D. Sabrina Voss. No subject line. No context. He closed his laptop, straightened his tie, and walked down the hallway with the same calm stride he had used for 14 years. Inside the glass-walled room, Sabrina sat at the head of the table, tablet in hand. HR was already there, a young man named Kevin, nervous, fiddling with a manila envelope. The atmosphere was too rehearsed to be anything other than what it was. Jason, Sabrina began with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Thank you for coming. I'll get straight to it. After reviewing our operational structure, the executive team has decided to eliminate several legacy roles as part of our streamlining initiative. Unfortunately, your position is among those impacted." Kevin slid the envelope forward. "Severance package, NDA clauses, final paycheck details." Jason didn't touch it. Sabrina continued. "Your contributions have been appreciated. You helped build the foundation we're scaling now. But as we pivot toward a more tech-driven model, alignment is key." Jason listened without blinking. He had expected this, just not today. He nodded slowly. "I see." Kevin jumped in nervously, reading off bullet points he barely understood. "Health coverage, transition services, options for Cobra." Sabrina checked her watch halfway through the explanation. When Kevin asked if Jason had any questions, he simply stood. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, his voice calm, his expression unreadable. Sabrina offered her hand across the table. Jason shook it briefly. Her fingers were cold. As he walked back to his office for the last time, no one made eye contact. A few junior analysts glanced up, then away. The same people he had quietly helped close their first deals, get their first listings, navigate their first client meltdowns. None of them spoke. Jason opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a single cardboard box. Inside went a framed photo of his daughter's college graduation, a carved wooden business card holder gifted by a client 10 years ago, his worn notebook, names, numbers, dates, deals. He paused for a moment, then opened his file cabinet and removed one slim binder. Everything else he left behind. He didn't say goodbye. As he stepped outside, sunlight hit his face. He took a long breath and let it settle in his chest. Redstone had erased him from their future. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to look into, was that the building they were standing in was leased, and the lease was owned by Sunhaven Equity Holdings. Jason Guerra didn't just walk away with a cardboard box. He walked away holding the lever to their entire foundation. Jason Guerra didn't go home to sulk after being fired. He went home to work. While the team at Redstone Realty Group carried on with their Tuesday meetings, adjusting to a new org chart that no longer included his name, Jason was in his quiet sunlit home office pulling folders from a locked cabinet labeled Sunhaven. Inside was the real story, the one no one at Redstone ever thought to ask about. Years ago, while the company was expanding aggressively into suburban development, Jason had noticed something during one of his field assessments. The parcels Redstone wanted most strategic corners, access lots, future transit corridors, were often bundled with landowners who didn't want to sell everything at once. The solution, Jason would negotiate partial sales for Redstone while arranging quiet purchases of adjacent or infrastructurally critical parcels through a private firm he had founded, Sunhaven Equity Holdings, LLC. It was legal, transparent, and approved by Redstone's legal team as long as there was no direct competition, and there wasn't. Jason never used Sunhaven to block Redstone. He used it to fill in the cracks the company didn't even know existed. Utility easements, service roads, small strips of land that provided access to larger tracts. He paid fair prices. He kept everything separate. And one of those holdings was the parcel beneath Redstone's brand-new $18 million headquarters. They didn't own it. They leased it through a 12-year land agreement Jason had personally structured and negotiated under Sunhaven. The lease had all the hallmarks of a standard commercial deal, fixed-rate payments, usage clauses, and a quiet but critical clause: if the tenant materially changed its leadership purpose or function, the lease could be reviewed and terminated early without penalty upon 60 days' notice. No one in the executive suite had read the fine print. Jason had spent his career writing the fine print. As Sabrina Voss pushed forward with her modernization campaign, firing senior staff, dissolving legacy relationships, and shifting the company's real estate focus away from long-term partnerships, she had unknowingly triggered that clause. Jason drafted the termination letter carefully. It was firm, respectful, and airtight. He wasn't evicting them, not yet. He was just exercising his contractual right to reevaluate tenancy terms in light of operational changes. The letter landed on Sabrina's desk by Thursday morning, delivered by overnight courier from a firm she'd never heard of, Sunhaven Equity Holdings. Her assistant opened it and blinked. "I think this has to do with the building." Sabrina skimmed the first paragraph, then again. She called legal. Legal requested the original lease. After 2 hours of silence, her general counsel finally called her back. "Yeah, they're within their rights." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Jason structured this lease in such a way that the company doesn't own the dirt under its own HQ. And if he chooses to, he can legally terminate the agreement with 60 days' notice." Sabrina froze. That afternoon, a second notice arrived, this time from a regional broker representing a group of local landowners. They were no longer interested in selling to Redstone. They preferred to work with a smaller, more personal firm they had come to trust. The firm's name, Sunhaven. By Friday, 3 sellers had canceled Redstone's letters of intent. 2 commercial lenders flagged their files for review, and one of their developers called Jason directly asking if he was open to joint ventures. Jason wasn't vengeful. He was just prepared. He'd built trust while others built spreadsheets. And now, as Redstone scrambled to recover its footing, they were discovering a harsh truth. They didn't just fire a man, they fired the foundation. By the following week, the cracks beneath Redstone Realty Group weren't just forming, they were spreading fast. Sabrina Voss had spent months streamlining operations, centralizing power, and removing what she called legacy inefficiencies. But now, with Jason Guerra gone and the lease termination notice from Sunhaven Equity Holdings in full effect, those so-called inefficiencies were proving to be the very threads holding the company together. It began with silence. Calls to longtime landowners started going unanswered. Sabrina's acquisition team, full of fresh MBAs and software-generated lead lists, couldn't understand why sellers weren't responding. A promising deal for a 40-acre development stalled when the family farm owner, who had informally agreed to sell, suddenly backed out. "We were dealing with Jason," the owner told them flatly. Now we're not. 2 more deals, one in the outer suburbs, another tied to a commercial corridor expansion, were pulled within days. These weren't just random rejections. These were sellers Jason had built relationships with for years. Their decisions weren't emotional, they were relational. They didn't trust Redstone anymore. They trusted Jason. Sabrina attempted to contain the situation by holding an emergency internal briefing, downplaying the losses as temporary setbacks in seller sentiment. But behind the scenes, panic was setting in. The legal team had confirmed the land lease termination was binding. They had 53 days to either renegotiate or relocate. And with 3 of their largest development projects, frozen investor confidence began to wobble. Jason, meanwhile, was calm. From his home office, he reviewed messages from brokers, architects, even city planners. Many were discreetly reaching out. They weren't looking to gossip, they were looking to work. His reputation as a man who could get landowners to trust again, especially in a post-pandemic market, was becoming his greatest currency. He received a call from a regional healthcare network that had originally planned to partner with Redstone on a medical park project. They were concerned about the internal instability at Redstone and asked Jason if Sunhaven would be willing to take over negotiations. "I'm open to a conversation," he said simply. Meanwhile, Redstone's operations team discovered another problem. Jason had been personally managing a handful of off-market deals that were now in legal limbo. Some of the supporting documentation for those deals had been filed through third-party legal representatives, and the titles were in holding patterns that required Jason's coordination to unlock. Without him, they stalled. Deals that had been expected to close in Q3 were now flagged as at risk. And the worst was still to come. One of the firm's mid-level directors, unaware of the shifting dynamics, called a property owner directly to reassert Redstone's position. The owner hung up mid-call. An hour later, Jason received a voicemail from that same owner. "I'd rather leave the land to my grandchildren than work with those people," the voice said. "If you're still doing business, I'm still interested." By the end of the week, Redstone's acquisition funnel had dried to a trickle. Sabrina Voss stood in her glass office, staring at the company's dashboard. The numbers were dropping, not because of competition, not because of market trends, because the man she fired didn't just manage deals. He was the reason they ever happened at all. By the second week, Redstone Realty Group wasn't just stumbling, it was hemorrhaging. What had once been a sleek operation full of confidence and investor optimism was now a company scrambling to understand how it lost everything so quickly. Sabrina Voss moved between crisis calls and emergency meetings, her composure thinning with each unanswered email from property owners and each sudden cancellation from once reliable sellers. The dashboard that once tracked rising acquisition targets now glowed red with missed milestones. Internally, morale was cracking. Senior analysts whispered about Jason Guerra's exit like it was a ghost story, something that shouldn't have happened, something that now made sense in hindsight. His name was no longer spoken at meetings, but his absence was felt in every stalled deal, every confused landowner, and every vendor who refused to renegotiate. One morning, Redstone's CFO stormed into Sabrina's office. "We just got word that the Oak Ridge development, our flagship for next quarter, is being pulled," he said. "Seller's legal team says they're only willing to move forward if the deal goes through Sunhaven." Sabrina's throat tightened. She had spent the last several days trying to downplay the influence of Jason's private firm, but it was no longer a shadow, it was the new standard. To salvage the company's reputation, Sabrina ordered an internal PR campaign. She had the marketing team issue press releases claiming new innovations, partnerships, and a visionary restructuring. But the community wasn't fooled. Jason had built something more valuable than any press release trust. The kind of trust that doesn't come with slogans, but with late-night phone calls, handshakes in dusty barns, and showing up when no one else would. Meanwhile, Jason remained composed. He hadn't gloated, hadn't gone public. He didn't need to. His phone continued ringing, brokers offering co-listings, lenders asking if he'd consider formal partnerships, and even former Redstone clients quietly inquiring if Sunhaven was accepting new business. One call came from a local city planner. "We're reassessing the zoning approvals for the Midtown corridor. Your name keeps coming up as the one who actually understands the community. We'd be open to hearing your plans if you have any." Jason thanked him and made a note. Back at Redstone, the legal team confirmed that at least 3 major land deals were in danger of total collapse due to Jason's name being listed as the primary negotiator on original agreements that had never been formally transferred to new agents. In many cases, the contracts weren't just relationships, they were conditional. Without Jason, they were voidable. And then came the final blow, an email from a coalition of landowners in the Hillcrest expansion zone. It was short. Effective immediately, all active negotiations with Redstone Realty Group are suspended. Future discussions will be considered only through Sunhaven Equity Holdings or its authorized representatives. Sabrina stared at the message, her reflection trembling in the screen. Redstone had invested millions into systems analytics and software, but they had forgotten one thing. You can replace processes. You can't replace people. On the third Monday after Jason's firing, Redstone Realty Group finally asked for a meeting. It was scheduled discreetly, 2:00 p.m., conference room. The same glass-walled room where Jason Guerra had been dismissed just weeks earlier. But this time the air felt different. He wasn't walking in as an employee. He was entering as leverage. Jason arrived on time wearing a charcoal gray suit and a calm, unreadable expression. He carried a slim leather folder and walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything under control. Across the table sat Sabrina Voss, visibly tired but still trying to maintain her polished corporate exterior. Beside her were the CFO, 2 legal advisors, and the interim head of acquisitions. No one spoke until Jason took his seat. Sabrina began carefully. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. We understand there have been disruptions, and we'd like to discuss how we might collaborate moving forward." Jason looked at her steady. "I'm here to listen." The CFO leaned in. "We've had multiple property owners express a willingness to resume negotiations, but only through your firm. We're open to exploring a partnership." Jason nodded once. Then from his folder, he pulled out a single-page document and slid it across the table. It was a service agreement, clear, professional, and direct. Sunhaven Equity Holdings would act as Redstone's exclusive acquisitions partner for all projects involving landowners previously engaged by Jason. Redstone would route all such deals through Sunhaven, paying a fixed commission plus a 5% equity stake in any developments completed on that land. In return, Sunhaven would restore communication, reestablish trust, and facilitate the deals Redstone could no longer close alone. The CFO scanned the numbers. "This is substantial," Jason responded without raising his voice. 3 weeks ago, I was a salary expense. Today, I'm your only viable path to land. The cost of losing those projects entirely would be far more than what's written here." Sabrina glanced down, lips pressed tight. "We'll need to review with legal." Jason cut in, gently but firmly. "Of course, you'll find the terms are clean. but I'll need an answer within 72 hours. Some of these landowners are already speaking with my other partners." The room went quiet. One of the attorneys spoke up. "Assuming we move forward, would you consider returning in a consultative role?" Jason didn't blink. "No, this isn't a return. It's a transition. You don't need an employee. You need a bridge." The message was clear. He wasn't looking to go back. He had moved on and up. As the meeting concluded, Sabrina stood and offered her hand. Jason shook it, his grip calm, steady. "Thank you," she said. Jason met her gaze, voice steady. Sometimes losing someone quietly is the loudest mistake a company makes. Then he turned, walked out of the room this time, not as someone they let go, but as someone they would now depend on. Jason Guerra never raised his voice. He never made threats, never posted a rant, never tried to humiliate those who cast him aside. He simply prepared quietly, intelligently, and with a long view that most people in power never bother to take. In less than a month, the man they dismissed as obsolete had become the one person they could no longer operate without. And he didn't just win back his dignity, he changed the rules of the game, on his terms. He built something leaner, simpler, human. Sunhaven didn't need a skyscraper or a marketing team, it had relationships. And that in the end was more powerful than any system. What happened at Redstone is a lesson in leadership trust and the quiet strength of experience. Because sometimes the greatest form of justice isn't revenge. It's proving that you were the foundation all along. If this story spoke to you, tap that like button and share it with someone who knows the pain of being overlooked. And if you've ever built something they thought they could replace, drop a comment below with just 2 words, "Still standing." We read every comment, and your stories matter more than you think. Until next time, stay sharp, stay steady, stay ready.